Welcome to the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. This is your go-to resource for personal growth, mastering communication, and influencing and persuasion techniques that will help you unleash the full potential of yourself and others. Here is your host, Alex Morgan.
Welcome to another episode of the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. My name is Alex Morgan, and I'm a master trainer of hypnosis and NLP. And on this episode, let's welcome Kristen Nolan. Kristen is an experienced professional in corporate sales and account management, known for her skill in building connections and empowering others. Kristen excels as a senior client account manager at Valet. She drives success through strategic partnerships and personalized service, helping clients achieve their goals. Outside work, Kristen contributes to community service and educational initiatives in sunny Tampa, Florida, with her husband, 3 children, and rescue dog, Fifi. Join Kristen as she shares her journey of balancing career, family, and personal passions with dedication and a relentless drive to make a meaningful impact wherever she goes. All right, Kristen, thanks so much for joining the show. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We were talking about some cool stuff before, especially with relationships. And one of your go-tos is cultivating meaningful connections. So specifically in something like business or with clients or something, how can someone do that really, really well?
Yeah, so I feel like human connection is something that we all are searching for. And so one of the things that I get to do in my role at Interview Valet is that I get to introduce people to other people that they can connect with on podcasts and be a guest. And they can share their expertise in an authentic way and build relationships with both the host and the audience. And so it's really almost like matchmaking from a podcasting perspective, which is really cool. So as I'm going through and looking at potential shows for my clients, I want to make sure that, there's going to be a good connection there, right? I don't get it right 100% of the time, but I think there's definite value in the way that we connect with people, especially, as a podcast guest or as a podcast host.
I want to say, I want to compliment you because all the guests that you guys have sent me, at least I've really enjoyed connecting with and speaking to. We were kind of talking about a few in
Yeah.
particular. So let's say that, you have a guest and you want to place them somewhere. What are some of the main things that you're looking for? Are you more looking at them as a person, also their audience, or there other factors involved?
Yeah, so I think the primary thing for me is going to be target audience. We really focus on the target audience. A lot of times, I will have clients that will be like, I just want to be on a really big show. I want to be in front of all these people. We found that that's not best strategically, right? Bigger is not better, better is better. So, how I've sort of explained it to people in the past is, would you rather be like, the NFL invites you to come to a halftime show, right? Everyone's there for football. They're there to watch the halftime show, and they give you 5 minutes to talk about your business and everything that you do. Do you think people are going to be interested? Probably not. Whereas if you think of it in terms of like where you're going to get really the benefits, right? So if your target audience is dentists, maybe you're going to work at, you're going to present at a dental conference, right? You have a room full of 2,000 dentists or, however many dentists. That's going to be your prime target. So that's what I like to explain to my clients as how podcast interview marketing works is it's really getting you in front of the people that that your message is going to resonate. So they turn you up versus turn you off.
That's really good insight because
Yeah.
I've reached out to other podcasts. I've been guests on some myself, and from what they say, I think I've been on some bigger ones. And
Yep.
what I noticed too is it might be totally different, the whole experience as a guest on a bigger one to where something maybe more niche and the person's like totally psyched to talk to you, where
Yeah.
the bigger one, they might be like, okay, well, who is this guy coming at 10 o'clock? Who am I going to be speaking to? So I've kind of gotten that vibe from other
Yeah,
people as well. So
absolutely.
it's interesting. Do you notice that ever as well? Something like this?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a client, and he was a great client, lots of great information, and on our initial call, we were like, "What, do you have, like, a wish list podcast?" And he said, "Well, I wanna be on Joe Rogan." And I was like, I mean, great guy, obviously, you would have a lot of visibility there, but I think you would be a small fish in a big pond, right? So, you're not gonna have the same impact, in doing that, and so one thing that I typically will advise my clients to do is if they're just starting out and they've never done a podcast before, start out with like the smaller ones. Get comfortable, right? I can tell you that my first interview as a guest, I was nervous. I was sweating. I got off the interview and was like, "Oh, I should have said this. I should have done this." So really as you gain some additional experience, I think then you start sort of like, going on larger shows from there, but I think it's important to start, smaller. And one of my colleagues says, start ugly, right? Like, it's not your first interview is not going to be your best interview. You're going to consistently grow and get better at being a guest and connecting.
So what have you noticed now after doing some interviews yourself then that makes it easier to connect or have more confidence doing that? What are you doing differently, would you say?
Yeah, I think the confidence really comes in, I live an everyday life built on connection. So like I'm not just here saying it, like I live it every day. And so I think that it comes from, really being confident in what you're talking about. And one of the great things about podcasting, especially as like a marketing tool, is that if you're doing other types of marketing, right? You're on TV or you're on the radio, you get a very small portion of time, 30 seconds, 5 minutes. Whereas when we're having this conversation, people can listen to me and go, I like her personality. I like the way that she can connect with me. I want to do business with her. I want to do business with him. So it's really sort of this way to sort of try before you buy. And it's not that like slimy, like I'm going to send you a cold LinkedIn message or a cold email. It's that the person that's listening really has an opportunity to get to know you as a person and your expertise and kind of what you bring to the table. So then the conversations that you have afterwards tend to be more connected and they get a better version of who you are.
It's funny that you say that because I was listening to a podcast once and I actually knew the person and they were a guest on someone else's show. And then once they were a guest on someone else's show, then I was like, okay, I think now I want to buy something from them, even though I knew them
Yeah.
before. So it's funny how that happens. So a lot of the clients then that you've had, I noticed a lot of them are authors as well. A lot of times they're
Mhm.
promoting different books or they come on. I always let people plug stuff at the end. Is there other things that you see people promoting? So maybe if there's someone out there who's afraid to go on podcasts, maybe you can share some things like, hey, you don't have to be like the best-selling author. You don't necessarily
Yeah.
have to be this. Like, what are other things that you see people doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about podcast interview marketing is like if you're an introvert, right? And our CEO Tom often talks about this. You can be an introvert and it's like a conversation between two people versus you standing up and being a keynote speaker in front of a huge audience. It's going to have a similar impact. But you don't have those jitters going into it. Like, I mean, I can tell you we have an internal podcast, the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, and I can tell you that the first couple of times that I was the host and was interviewing clients, I mean, I would be sweating. I was so nervous that my sweat was going to show up on the screen. It was totally crazy. But now that I've done it a few times, I don't feel that, right? And so I think just getting out there and putting yourself out there and really figuring out what resonates most with people that are listening and what value that you bring, that can boost your confidence because then you're confident in what you bring to the table and a way that you can connect with people. And so I think it's so beneficial that I always say a good podcast is it almost feels like you're in a coffee shop, kind of eavesdropping on two people sitting next to you. Um and then you're also learning something. So, I think that there's definite value there.
Yeah, it's almost like having like a social meeting Like, not that you're
Yes.
going to meet someone, but you're socializing about something where some people maybe think like, oh, they're just going to ask me a bunch of questions. It's an interview where it's much more like you say you're connecting with someone on a deeper level because all the guests that I have or when I go as a guest, you're sharing like your stories, you're sharing what you're passionate about. Anyone can do that. It's easy.
Yep.
Everyone has stories that they can share. So you notice the same thing with while you host as well.
Yeah, and I often advise my clients, a podcast is not a sales pitch, right? You're not going on to talk about, all of the things that you have. There'll be time at the end where the host will say, how can our listeners find out more about you? That's your opportunity. So really just being genuine in the connection that you have. And then another thing that I tell my clients is like being a podcast guest is not transactional, right? So we have people and they're going out and they're doing networking events. Look at this as a networking event. Find a way to connect with a host. I've had clients that have hired the host or been hired by the host because they had such a great connection. So I think really just being on the right shows with the right host yields the right results that you're looking for.
One of the things I noticed as a host too, when I first got with guests and everything, it's you're like, okay, you're thinking like, what am I going to ask him next? What am I going to ask him next? And I had kind of this voice in my head. And then I thought, all you have to do is listen what they're saying and just kind of lead them into something else that you know that they want to talk about anyway. So
Yeah.
when you're hosting shows, how do you, that's how I kind of do it. Do you do something similar or how do you kind of come up with different questions and where you're going to lead the show? Cause like we were talking before this, I don't necessarily ever have like a huge plan. It's like, hey, let's
Yeah.
just kind of talk and see where it goes and have some fun at the same time.
I think different approaches work for different people, right? So I think that some of the most genuine conversations are ones that it's literally just us having a conversation as we are now. When I am the host, I typically like to just have a couple of questions in my back pocket, right? If there is a lull in the conversation or I'm like, okay, we've sort of reached a dead end, which happens sometimes. I just have those as sort of like a way to sort of pull the conversation back together. I am a planner by nature, so I just have everything like I'm always trying to stay 2 steps ahead, right? So I'm always trying to predict, what's coming next and to stay ahead of it.
Okay. I have a
Yeah.
like kind of a surprise question, but I'll save it
Okay.
till the end to see that what you, it's to kind of just see your perspective on
Oh yeah,
something.
perfect.
I also wanted to touch because you have a really unique background being a military spouse and everything like that. So, what if you notice like moving to different places and stuff? How do you build connections then? And in this way, is it something that's easy because other people in a similar situation? How does that kind of go to build those connections?
Yeah, so usually, and this is, the military community is very small. So typically what will happen, and I do this for other people that I know as well, if once as soon as I mention to friends that I'm moving, they introduce you to people, right? So there's this consistent like, "Hey, you need to meet my friend, so and so, they live in Tampa as well." And so then you have sort of like a connection there. I also will usually attend events or like I wanted to meet people here. My husband and I just moved to Tampa over the summer. So I literally one of my favorite boutiques here I went and I said, I just want to work one Saturday a month. It's a way to connect with people that I work with at the boutique. And it's also a way to connect with people outside of the boutique as well. So it's really just, finding ways to connect with people with similar interests. And I like to look at that from a lens with Interview Valet. Like my clients, I feel like are my friends. Obviously like in a professional way, but like I always say this to them. I'm like, your success is my success. If their campaign is not successful, I'm not successful. So I want to be their biggest cheerleader. I want to connect with them and I want to just make sure that we're maximizing the visibility of their time, talent, effort, and then obviously like, the monetary side of things as well.
Okay, you mentioned, them making like an impact. So
Mhm.
how do you measure that then with do they have like a specific goal in mind when they come to you that they want to do something on these shows and you measure it this way or is it something just like, hey, I loved all the shows I went on. It felt good. Where do you kind of
Yeah.
gauge that?
So, I mean, I have clients that have shared with me. So I had one client that said he went on a podcast, and from that podcast, someone listened to him and he was able to close a $90,000 deal. So obviously like that's measurable. We do also have like welcome pages where clients can see the traffics from a specific website or a specific podcast. And so you can measure it that way. And then other times, people will be like promoting book sales, as you mentioned. We work with a lot of nonfiction authors. So they're promoting book sales. Or, I have clients that have been asked to, be keynote speakers with hosts or with listeners. So there's really so many ways that you can gain benefits from it. And I think it really comes down to, as we've talked previously, like the connection, right? If you and I are having a conversation and, someone comes to you in a couple of weeks and says, "Hey, my marketing strategy isn't going really well. Do you have any ideas?" You could then be like, "Hey, I just had Kristen on from Interview Valet. We had a great conversation. Let me make an introduction." Like I had a client of mine introduce someone new yesterday. So it's just really, I think, having the ability to connect and, meet those expectations and, connect on a deeper level that people want to introduce you to other people as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like a way, like you said earlier, though, to network because
Mhm.
I look at networking too. Like it's not just, hey, what's in it for me? You have to give value to that person for them to also want to give value to you. And
Yep.
on a podcast, you're both spending each other's time. You're getting to know the person and you're kind of giving value back. So, kind of what's your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think that, and I advise all my clients. In fact, I was just putting together kind of a best practices from a guest perspective. Like, what does that look like, right? Because I have guests and they will show up, record an interview and be like, "It was nice knowing you. Have a good day," and move on. But I think there is really some benefits in, the connection. And then it goes beyond just the interview, right? So like, what am I doing afterwards? How am I promoting it? How am I showing the value to the host? And I always tell my clients this: the more you promote as a guest, the more the host will promote as a host. And so then it becomes this like mutually beneficial connection where you're able to take that further. And I've had clients that have been asked for second and third and fourth interviews, obviously like, down the line, but there's so much value that you bring in the conversation that it can continue. It doesn't have to be transactional. And I think, especially for me, I want that connection with people. I don't want it to be transactional.
I think for me as a guest, one of the things you mentioned was, the promotion. It's not just about
Mhm.
the promotion. For me, it's a lot when I'm the guest, like that the host also communicates something or someone from their team at least is like, hey, heads up, we're releasing the episode in like
Yes.
2 weeks. Here's where I'm gonna promote it. Here's the links, something like this. This is something that I always send to you guys. I think like, hey, this is the date we're gonna release it. I at least like this sort of, communication and things as well. It's really helpful when you go on. So you feel like you're, valued.
Yeah, and I've had, some guests will do like repurposing materials, and I even tell my clients, I deal with a lot of, high level CEOs. I deal with a lot of people that are like, "Kristen, my schedule is jam packed full. Like I can't add another thing." And I will tell my clients, like, even if you don't have the, 15 or 20 seconds to like share the hosts with like, a couple of sentences, just share it, right? Just share it, tag the host, whatever that looks like, or have a team member do that. And one thing that we talk about often is that from each podcast, you should be able to get about 30 days worth of repurposing content. If you're pulling, short videos that you can share on social media like LinkedIn or, Instagram. And then you can also turn those into like blog posts and different things, especially with the rise of AI. I mean, the sky is the limit for how you can repurpose the content and utilize that for additional things. And that can free up time there that you can then dedicate to something else.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the guests are so busy they can hardly type in a few lines, let's say. So do you work with a lot of busy professionals, authors, speakers? They probably have several businesses, all this. So what are some of the things that you would recommend to kind of little hacks for time management that you could recommend other busy professionals or just busy people in general? I mean, we're all pretty busy with all sorts of stuff these days.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a military spouse. I'm also a mom of three, right? So I have a 3-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 11-year-old. Our schedules are jam packed. One thing that I live by is my calendar. So, I have everything personal and professional on my calendar. And I do time blocking. So I will go in on Sundays usually, and I will sort of block off my calendar. And I do it down to like, if I want to have lunch with a friend, it's on my calendar. And I found that what happens is that I'm able to focus better because if a friend comes to me and says, "Hey, I'd love to have lunch on Wednesday," maybe I don't have a client meeting and I could go. But if I've blocked it out and I've sort of said, okay, these are the number of hours I need to get in this week and this is how I'm going to do it, then I have to say, sorry, I can't make lunch this week, but how about next week? And so then I'm able to really focus and keep in mind, what I want to accomplish for the week and what my hours look like.
Nice. So do you also then block off time like for yourself or with your husband or like downtime to where it's just like you time? Is this something you block off too? Or
Sometimes it depends. Like this time of year, I will because I have so many errands with just preparing everything for the holidays. And so I will do that, or like if I go and like go get my nails done or something like that, I will put that on my schedule. And so I do block in things like that, and then I try you know, my schedule is very flexible, right? So if I want to go volunteer at my kid's school for 2 hours, then maybe I make up those 2 hours in the evening. So what I've really tried to do as we sort of go into 2025, one of my personal goals is, no work after 8 o'clock. So I want to put my kids to bed. I want to shut down the computer from the day, and then I want to go and just take that time to wind down. Because I think so often a lot of us will get on our phones or we're on social media. And so then it makes it more difficult to, sort of wind down and turn our minds off.
well, and sometimes once you start scrolling on social media, you wonder where the time even went. You're like, why did I
Yeah.
even go on this app? I'll do that. I'll go on my phone and I'll be like, why did I even open this? I meant to open something else and actually do something on there.
I was just gonna say, I like at night I will get on TikTok and just like just scroll through it. So friends were like, TikTok is gonna be banned in the US. And I'm like, please give me back my extra hour a day. I'll take it. So
Yeah, I keep hearing that randomly. I don't since I'm not in the US, I don't follow all the US news all
yeah.
the time, but I hear that randomly over
Yeah.
here. So what are some of the biggest since you started doing this and really blocking off and time blocking, what are some of the biggest benefits that you're noticing?
So for me, it allows me to be very specific and strategic in my schedule, right? So if I know that I need to have 25 hours blocked off on my calendar, I'm not getting to Thursday and going, I've only worked 5 hours this week. How am I going to sort this out? It also allows me to be more aware of like my client calls. So like I have client calls, and then I have sort of like what I would consider to be like focus time where I'm answering emails or doing other things behind the scenes. And so it gives me so much more control in terms of when I'm meeting with my clients. And then, I don't want to have a day where I'm meeting back to back, with 4 or 5 different clients, because sometimes that can take a lot of brain power. And so what I will typically do is I'll schedule something with the client, I'll have a little bit of a break, and then I'll schedule with another client. So then I'm not just like 14 clients in a day and I'm exhausted by the end of the day.
Yeah, because you mentioned flexibility, how you have a really flexible schedule. So when you're doing the time blocking, does it even help this flexibility as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I have blocked off, maybe I'm like, okay, I'm going to block off my grocery shopping time. I'm able to see what I have and I'm working, within that parameters, right? So if I've blocked off an hour to go grocery shopping and it takes me 30 minutes and I want to go somewhere else, I have the freedom to do that. But I also know, hey, I need to be back at my desk in an hour. And so I'm not running around. I'm not doing things like I'm very focused to accomplish the goal that I need to accomplish to move on to the next thing. And I think it also helps because, I can say yes to things and
Mm.
I can make, make a mental note of like, I'm saying yes to this, but that means that I'm going to have to, work an extra hour this evening. Am I okay with that? Does that fit in with what I want to do to accomplish my goals?
This is really helpful for myself as well, so I'm glad that I
Awesome.
dug into this,
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
So the kind of the surprise question that I mentioned, since you're really good at building relationships,
Mhm.
connections, and all this, if someone had no money at all
Yeah.
whatsoever, what would be like a really good way that something maybe they didn't consider to build like a really meaningful connection? Would you say
Like in terms of business or
it could be personal or business,
okay.
just a really good way to build like a meaningful connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, every day we have a million opportunities to connect with people, right? Like I was in the grocery store today and a local high school had their special needs students in like fixing fixing the racks of food. And I went and, most of the time people will just walk by and be like, okay. But I went and I was like, oh my gosh, this looks so amazing. Like you guys are doing such a great job. And the teacher was in the aisle with them and she like looked at me and her face just sort of lit up. And then the 3 boys that were doing it, they turned around and they were so thankful. And so or even like, just simple things. We meet a ton of people every single day. And so I'm in the South. Well, we lived in North Carolina, but I mean, every person I would pass, I would smile, right? Like a smile costs nothing. And so if you're able, we never know what other people are dealing with or going through. And so even just a simple smile is a great way to connect with someone and it can change their day, right? Like maybe they're in a terrible mood and they just have someone smile at them and that can make a huge difference.
I have a friend who says, like, you can be anything in this world, so you might as well be kind. We always can choose, so we need more of this in the world.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else, so I'm not sure if you want to plug something in now, if it to, maybe you guys are want to plug something at Interview Valet or personally, if you have any
Yeah.
last thoughts or anything. It was great having you on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So, if you want to learn more about Interview Valet or connect with me, you can do so at interviewvalet.com. That's valet with a V. And it'll be /Kristen, spelled Kristen. And I'll give that to you so you can put it in the show notes as well. But I would love to hear from you. So, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or via email on that site.
Yeah, I just want to say about Interview Valet, to all the listeners, they've sent me some really interesting guests who have a lot of insights and a lot of knowledge, and they're always really fun. So if someone's considering something like that, definitely do it. It'd really help. I think everything, like personally and professionally, it's really fun being a guest.
I was just gonna say that, we deal with a lot of nonfiction authors, but we do deal in the health and wellness space, the business space, and then real estate and investing as well.
Nice, yeah. So there's something I think for
Yeah,
everyone. So definitely check it out. And Kristen, thanks so much again for
yeah.
coming on.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
So thanks for listening. And wherever you listen to this podcast, please rate the podcast so it can get into the minds of more people. And I'd love to hear your feedback. And I hope to see you on the next episode.